Well, hey, podcast listeners, in episode 59 of the Pixar Post podcast, we're going to welcome the podcast back into the fold, starting with our interview series from our trip to Pixar to discuss and dive into The Incredibles 2. Yes, that's right, we were out there for the press event where we dive into all the different sessions where they talk about how they made the story, how they designed the house, how they did this, and all so on and so forth.
Everything Incredibles 2.
Correct, yeah, and we'll talk about all those different things. So I think the first little bit of Pixar news that we'll kind of jump into is that if you haven't seen the Incredibles 2 toys that are out there, the Disney Store just released theirs actually on Saturday, which was actually ahead of schedule. And our theory is that was released ahead of schedule because of Toys R Us. Yeah, because they released theirs early. And so we think it's really more of a play of like, they broke shelf date because the Disney Store always releases first.
Yes.
But that didn't happen this time because Toys R Us is like, who cares? We're selling it.
Yeah, they're going out. They're clearing out their warehouses, so they're putting everything they have on the shelves.
Right. So
it's funny because Walmart and Target followed suit pretty quickly.
Yeah, because we were actually at Target yesterday, and we're recording this on Sunday evening. It'll be released Monday when you're listening to this on April 16th. So they did the same thing. So none of this was supposed to be out till May. So it's interesting that they're just doing that early.
Right.
But the other bit of news, too, is actually R. Lee Emery. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. E-M-R-E-Y, I believe.
I believe so.
I think his most famous role was Full Metal Jacket, which is not a children-friendly movie if you've ever seen that. But he voiced the sergeant in the Green Army Men troop, if you will. That was, sir, yes, sir!
In the Toy Story series?
Yeah, he was always very, serious, and Woody'd be like, oh, okay, at ease. But he actually passed away at age 74 from complications with pneumonia. That was announced by his longtime manager. So that was actually kind of a bummer. It's unfortunately with the Toy Story franchise, there's been a lot that has touched that as far as between Slinky Dog and now Potato Head and this sergeant as well. I can't remember if there was anybody else that was part of that.
Yeah,
Joe Ranft. I guess you could say that with Wheezy.
Yeah. I think of, Doc, Cars franchise, but...
Right. Yeah, and then Mirage from Incredibles. It's just another sad passing that hopefully that doesn't affect the Toy Story gang too much. I doubt it because technically he parachuted out in Toy Story 3 and said it's been an honor serving with you.
Right.
So I don't think that'll affect anything with Toy Story 4, but how we can transition this a little bit with the news is that, pardon the hiccup that I just had there, is that actually with Toy Story 4, we'll learn a touch about that in the main focus of our podcast today, which is going to be the interview that we had with Brad Bird, who's the writer-director, and Nicole Paradis.
For Incredibles 2.
Correct. Yeah, not Toy Story 4.
Yeah.
And then Nicole Grindle and John Walker, who were the producers for Incredibles 2. And in the interview, one of the things that Brad touches on is that, why did somebody, how did they move up and how did Toy Story 4 move back? And he gets into some really good insights there. Essentially, just to give you a high level here, since I brought it up and I don't want you to go, ugh, was that he said that they were a little further along in their development. And Toy Story 4, he said, was taking a lot of twists and turns and they didn't know where they were going to land. So it essentially sounds like they were having troubles. And he was like, they asked him, can you bump it up? And he said, sure, I can do that. So it was really like how are we going to make this happen? And what's funny is throughout the sessions that we had, and we'll talk more about this in our posts and more in the podcast coming up too. But in these sessions, they talked about the fact that they had to do a lot of things differently than they used to. For instance, they usually always do a full color script, which is where they just draw they always display it in the art of books as like that's the thumbnail drawings where it shows you just how the color kind of changes and the tone throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Real basic drawings, and Ralph Eggleston was going to do these in the similar fashion to how he did them on Inside Out, but they didn't have time. So they only color scripted a few scenes, and then the rest are really just storyboard drawings that they took to the next level. But yeah, they did a lot of things differently, and you'll hear Brad and Nicole talk about the fact as well that they think sometimes that when people's backs are against the wall, sometimes that means that things come out better because you have to make a decision and just go with it.
Yeah, quicker.
Yeah. But Brad also talks about the frustrations of that, which was super cool too, where he talks about the fact that sometimes it drove him nuts when he wanted to dive deeper into an element or of a story, and he couldn't. Because I can't hammer it out. I don't have time to figure it out. I just know that it doesn't work right now, so I got to already take a turn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how was it being in the room with him? Because I know you are such a fan of his work.
Yeah, and it was different than any other Pixar director that we've sat with before. The vibe in the room was different. Not just with me, the vibe in the room. Like, pin drop before he walked in.
Wow.
And he was a couple minutes running behind, and the conference room we were in was in the upper level, and you could see one of the two like catwalks or bridges that are...
Okay, similar to how when I was there for Coco.
Okay.
You could see it was kind of like a middle conference room overlooking the atrium.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And you could see him all of a sudden walking across with his
wow.
press escort, and everybody started being like, "Oh, he's coming." It was different.
That's kind of a cool lead up. That's kind of like a rock star entrance.
It was
almost.
a total rock star entrance. He just walked in, and he had a moderator, and they said essentially, like, questions go. And the lady that was the moderator started just pointing at people. And she would say, you. She was from the PR team, but it was essentially very well laid out. But it was a little bit of we're talking different in a sense that he's done so much. Like, you can't not know when you're looking at him that he's done hand-drawn animation direction, feature film direction, and 3D animation direction.
Well, live action feature films.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so live action, hand-drawn animation, 3D animation.
Yeah, feature films.
Correct.
That's crazy.
And the fact that he's kind of come in to be, for lack of better words, the cleaner on Ratatouille, where he came in and did that. You'll also hear some great insights in this interview about Ratatouille and how their back was against the wall with that one too, and they got it done in a year and a half, which is crazy. Now, granted, we'll talk more about it after. But yeah, it felt different. It was definitely rock star-ish, where you're like, you see a concert and you're like, oh my gosh, that is so-and-so on stage right now. And I've been listening to their music for years. And that's not to say that I wasn't starstruck with Pete Docter or Jonas Rivera when I sat literally knee to knee with Pete.
Right.
As we were in a big square, big square setup of tables. That was also like insane for me, knowing how early of an animator he was to the company and the films that he's done. I mean, I don't know. I look at Pete and I just see this gigantic, great, creative mastermind that really dives into his craft and creates this story that's drawn from true life. And I respect him for that. In some ways more than Brad. But when you think about Hollywood, it feels more Brad than Pete.
Okay.
Because Pete, when we walked in, and like I said, it's this big square table, and he's like, sit anywhere, and he's immediately like, hey guys, how's it going? He wanted to get to know us. Like, it was a different experience.
It's a different vibe.
It was a different vibe. Pete also was in his like signature white t-shirt with like a button-up plaid. Yeah, he always has that, which is fantastic because that's like my total look. Yes. But every time you see Brad too, he's just got the t-shirt with the black sports, the black blazer. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the hat, sometimes not. He's definitely got more of that. And Pete is such a cartoon character too, that you just, I don't know, you just want to hug him. I don't know. But I mean, I've like I said, I've talked to other directors too. Actually, have I? Because with Brian Fee too, but it just still isn't the same. It wasn't the same. Brian Fee gave a different vibe than Pete Docter did too. Yeah. Of course, they're all going to give a different vibe. They're all individual people, but there's a mystique around Brad
I get it.
Yeah. So, so that's... It was really cool. And Nicole Paradis Grindle, the producer, and John Walker, very welcoming as well. You can tell from their face. They're very happy. They're very warm and welcoming people. John and Brad worked on Tomorrowland together as well. So they've actually done a live action feature, which I thought was cool to carry that relationship forward. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm looking over some of my notes here. So the other thing I should talk about too is that, of course, there's going to be some spoilers in here. That's inevitable if we're talking about what went into the making of a film. So if for some reason you're trying to avoid those things, then I'm sad to say that, you should probably turn it off. But nothing is
plot driven.
There's some stuff.
Okay.
But to be honest, Brad Bird is so secretive.
I was going to say he's so secretive that he doesn't really give away.
Yeah, I mean, on
much.
Tomorrowland, there was rumors that he took all the staff's phones and you wouldn't let him to bring them on set any day to get any leaked images. You can feel his influence on the marketing that's been out there so far. Even what we saw from the film, we screened the first 22 minutes and then watched 3 or 4 other clips that were maybe like 2 to 4 minutes. Yeah, but still towards the beginning, because we didn't see anything else about the wannabe supers.
Okay.
We are going to be doing a post about that, which if you're listening to this and you haven't seen that, go back to pixarpost.com. It'll be right there on one of our lead images. But it's about the wannabe supers. He didn't talk about, and you'll hear my question that I asked him about the vocal booth, and who knocked it out of the park from the old group and the new group. And he was careful enough to not reveal anybody that hadn't already been revealed: Catherine Keener, Bob Odenkirk, Sophia Bush, of the new people. So he knew exactly what he was doing at all times. So anyways, you're not going to hear anything that's too major, but I just want to at least preface it that there's still going to be some of that in there. But the interview, you're going to hear awesome stuff about Will Honey, Frozone's wife, be in the movie, and a couple other things. Where I want to kind of shift to now is just before we play the interview, is just recap a little bit of the trip. I'll dive into more details, but just so to give you a flavor of what else is coming from the trip as well. Sound like an okay idea?
Yeah.
All right. So the first night that we were out there, this is just a couple weeks ago from April 16th. So,
yeah,
it was a quick. Yeah, usually sometimes the embargo is like a month or so out, but this is a quick one. So it started with us getting to the studio at 6 p.m., pretty standard for how these events go. One of the first things you do after you check in is you kind of wander by the store. The store is closed at that point, the Pixar Studio store, which is just, again, for employees and guests. It's closed, but I, of course, have to peek in and see what I'm looking at. And I'm starting to go scanning around, and I stop and I say, oh my goodness, I see a holy grail item for us.
Yes, something we've been looking for years.
Right, which is the wooden Toy Story
Knick-Knack bank.
I shouldn't say Toy Story, but the wooden Knick-Knack bank.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's this oak kiln dried snowman
bank
that you when you put coins in, his tie, you put it in his top hat, but his tie swivels his scarf swivels when you put it in. And it's just always been super cool and cute, and anything related to the shorts we love, especially early shorts Knick-Knack, which is awesome. So we were able to pick that up. Side note, on the way home, there was an awesome story that we tweeted about that I got stopped at airport security going through with that Knick-Knack bank.
Yes.
Because they were like, excuse me, sir, is this your bag? And I'm like, yes. They're like, we're going to need to search all your stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, why? And they're like, do you have a wooden hollow snowman that you're traveling with? And I was like, yes, I do. And they're like, why do you have that at this time of year?
Yeah.
And so that's a legit question.
Yeah, I props to the TSA because they're doing their job right there, but it is funny. And when you told it to me, when you called me and told me that story at the airport, I just kind of giggled. You could just help but laugh.
Right.
But you have a good rest of your story.
Yeah, so essentially they start opening it up and they're really confused by everything they're seeing. They're like, there's all this stuff that says Pixar and Incredibles 2 and notebooks, and they're just, what is going on? And I'm like, well, in case it's not obvious, I'm like, I just left the Pixar and I was at the Incredibles 2 like press reveal event. And so the girl's like, wait, really? And then the whole tone changes. It was no longer I was a psycho traveling with a hollow wooden bank.
Yeah,
It was a snowman bank.
Yeah.
In April. It was that I had been out there. And so then they're starting to piece it all together. They're like, okay. And they're like wondering why I have like a voice recorder and all these other things. So all of it's starting to come together. Mm-hmm. And so they can see that I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
But it was just funny because at the end, you know, as I was telling her like little insights that I was able to share, she's literally rubbing her arms and she's like, I'm getting chills. She's like, I can't wait to see it. When does it come out? So I'm like, June 15th. So yeah, it was kind of fun. That was a nice little side story that came from it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was lucky the next day when the store opened that I was able to get one because there were two. And I found out that when I went in there, they only had the one on display left. Somebody had just bought the other one right before me. And so I was sweating it. So anyways, we go in, and pretty much the first thing you do that night is you get whisked into the theater, which if you haven't heard me talk about the theater before, I'm not going to go into a whole big thing about it, but it's like the best movie theater you've ever been to, because they have to make sure that it's completely accurate in sound and color and all these other things. And the experience is great. They're wider seats, they're maple armrests, and the seats are this nice plush maroon red velvet. And it's just great. Of course, the lights then dim when they're going to start after Nicole, Grindle, and John Walker came out to introduce it real quick, that they said what we're going to see. The lights dim. The ceiling has, of course, stars on it with shooting stars, and then the crickets go, and then the red velvet curtain opens, and then the movie starts. No previews, nothing, no like come get, M&Ms at the front desk, none of that. It's great. So we watch the film, of course. I will say that a lot of times at these screening events, the people that are there are criticky film writers. I mean, these are people that, we've got other big name sites that are there. We're probably the lower on the totem pole in terms of, we're talking Entertainment Weekly, IMDb, big sites that cover all media.
All films.
Correct. All films, not just Pixar. Like, luckily we're included in that group because we center on Pixar. But when I just lost my train of thought here. What was I saying?
When you were watching it. So what?
Oh yeah. So what the difference is that typically when I've been to these screenings, when the jokes are happening on the screen, people aren't really laughing.
It's quiet.
It's also a small group. So It's not like you're seeing it with like a theater of several hundred people.
No, it's like maybe 30
Yeah, it's
people.
like 30, something like, it's around 30. But usually the jokes are, you're like, you don't know how the audience is going to react to it. When things are happening, people are quiet because they're analyzing it. They're not just watching it for entertainment value. They're analyzing it to write a post later about it. And so I can tell you that of any of the screenings that I've been in, shorts or full features at Pixar, there's never been more reactions and laughter than there has in the first 22 minutes.
Wow.
That, coupled with the fact that I've mentioned it before on our Hangouts on YouTube Live and in our posts, I believe maybe not on the podcast, but this is, I believe, a $1 billion movie worldwide. I think if Finding Dory has reached it, other films, like Toy Story 3, I believe that this is also a $1 billion release. So I think it'll be the third Pixar film that's crested that mark.
Interesting.
Because I think I've also said it too, that our website, all the posts that we do about Incredibles 2 are 25 to 40% higher in hits than they are for anything else that we've done. So I think we've got a $1 billion movie on our hands combined between the hits and...
Even though Coco was close.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely worldwide. Yeah. I mean, you mean as far as hits or as far as dollars?
Hits.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because dollars, it was a little shorter worldwide, but regardless, it was still up there. So anyways, we see the movie, loved it. I'm not going to reveal too much here, but holy cow, action-packed, humorous, just the shots and the selections, the layout, the decisions they made are insane. I mean, it's gorgeous. And right after you come off of Coco, you think you can't see a more visually gorgeous movie. And it's not from the sense that it's not as bright and colorful and vibrant as Coco, because of course it's not. But the detail seems amped up.
Okay. The
detail in the characters' faces and everything. And I know part of that is because we're used to seeing them from before and then now.
Right.
But that was great. We screened Bao after that, which I can't say anything about that now, but more to come within the next week. That it's a cute short. So after that, we left there. Everybody's awestruck and just like, jaws dropped and like going, no, when it stops. Inside Out was like, it was quiet when we were watching that because I think people were just taking it all in. Like traditional Pete films, it builds and builds and builds as it goes. And then this one is Brad hit you with the action right away. So it's cool. So we had our reception, like a little dinner reception with a whole bunch of Asian food that was inspired by Bao, since it is of Chinese heritage. So we had that over there, which was in the Brooklyn building, which was nice. It's always nice to go to their different buildings because the screenings are in the Steve Jobs building, the main building. And so I ended up just talking that evening with Domi Shi and the Bao team, which was really nice to be able to get some pre-insights before I then heard another session with them the next day and had a one-on-one interview, which, by the way, was like maybe my smoothest one-on-one interview I've ever had. So we go home that night. We go to our hotel. The next morning we come back bright and early, 7 o'clock in the morning. Started our sessions with a little breakfast. And then just to give a sprinkling of some of the other sessions that you're going to hear on the podcast and on our site with posts. There's one with the production team about creating the worlds of the film, the anatomy of an action scene with the animation and some of the layout team. There's a wardrobe of the film. There's one about Jack, and then we also took a tour of the brand new Pixar archives, which I'll save that for a full post and podcast episode of everything we heard and saw, but wow. And I recorded the audio walking through and talking with them. They said we could use it, and I was just like, okay, please. Yeah. I know a lot of it's going to be visual, but I'll see if I can still use it for the podcast. But I did. All these are recorded for the audio, and then we had a lot of one-on-ones, and then I also had even a fun activity that we did while I was there where I created my own superhero character. So they had like a whole bunch of construction paper and scissors and glue and all these other things, and they said keep it simple. So I didn't know what else to think, so I started channeling you, and I came up with that you like sharks so much.
I do. That
I came up with one called Red Shark, and so essentially he walks like on his like hind legs, and his arms, he has longer arms, generate shark teeth that are all like coned around and layered like shark teeth are, like how they're like so many different rows back that they have them. And so as he hits people, they go shattering off and like they regenerate like shark teeth do.
It's very creative.
You don't sound like you like it.
It's an interesting idea.
And then he can like grind down things with them too. Like he can like drill holes into things with them. Yeah,
that's intense.
It's a red shark.
Yeah,
he's a intense fighter.
Yeah.
But I was there and I was all thinking about supers, and I'm like, okay, superheroes and villains, and so I kind of went the villainy route. Yeah, he's gonna be red shark. And then I just thought it would be a cool visual too, that when you punch. When you hit something with the arms with the shark teeth, that they would go shattering and flying off all over the place. So visually, I was thinking it would kind of work. Even though you don't like it, it's all right.
I do.
All in all, though, it was, as you'd expect, magical. I ran into many people that we know and have talked to on this podcast before. So just a high level: Kelsey Mann, Danny Arriaga, Kat Hicks, Alan Barillero, Mark Andrews, which if you follow us on social media, you saw I posted a picture of, and many more that we'll discuss as well. So I think I've set it up enough. Why don't you say we get into it and actually play the interview with Brad Bird, Nicole Grindle, John Walker.
Sounds good.
Sure, I'm Nicole Grindle.
I am Brad Bird.
And John Walker.
Hi.
So we've heard a lot today about how little time a lot of departments have making this movie. I wonder if you could explain the kind of constraints.
I would, except there's no time.
Next question.
Next question.
And also, like, why did it work out that way?
We often shift, I wouldn't say often, but it has happened a number of times. The original Incredibles was supposed to be after Cars. It was going to be Nemo, Cars, Incredibles, and our reels came together a little earlier than Cars did, so we moved up. And the same situation happened here with Toy Story 4. They've been going a number of different directions in story, and it was concluded that we were a little further along than they were, so we moved up. So that was a challenge for us, but the studio is 3 times bigger than it was during Incredibles. So we actually, if we didn't choke, we could actually theoretically get the movie made, and then that is what came to pass.
And I would just add that it can be a real benefit to the production to be under some amount of pressure. Obviously, it was very intense for this team, as you heard from them, but having worked here in a number of films, I can tell you when there's that kind of schedule intensity, people really rise to the occasion, and I sometimes think they even do better work.
Yeah, when I got involved with Ratatouille, it was a little over a year and a half between my involvement and the finished film. And, we only retained 2 lines of dialogue and 2 shots from all of the previous versions that had been done. So it was like running in front of a train, laying down track in front of a moving train, and like Wallace and Gromit. But as Nicole said, that everyone rallied, and as long as it's clear where we want to go, people rise to the occasion.
I was hoping you guys could talk about the decision to set the film at the moment that the original ended, and any of the courses or options that you guys considered at the beginning.
I thought about aging everybody the way everybody does, and then I thought, no, that sucks. So that's about as deep as it went. No, what it is one of the conceits of the original film is that I tried initially when I was first starting to work on the project, long before Pixar or anything like that. It was even, I think, before Iron Giant, when I first had the idea. I went to a comic book shop and thought, I've got to think up new powers. And after about a half an hour in the comic book shop, I realized every power has been done by somebody, somewhere, even if it's only self-published 100 issues in Ohio. Everything has been done. And then I, right after that, a little epiphany, I realized I'm not very interested in the powers. That's not the part that interests me. What interests me is the idea of having a family and having there be a reason to hide the powers. And once I had that insight into what I wanted to do, I picked the powers based on who they were in the family. And so men are always expected to be strong, so I had Bob have super strength. Mothers are always pulled in a million different directions, so I had her be elastic. Teenagers are insecure and defensive, so I had Violet have force fields and invisibility. 10-year-olds are energy balls that can't be stopped. And babies are unknowns. Maybe they have no powers, maybe they have all powers. We don't know. So that's what Jack was. He was seemingly the first normal one in the family, and then at the end of Incredibles you find out that he's a wild card and that he's sort of a Swiss Army knife of powers. And that to me reminds me of the way babies can grasp languages really easily and adopt them easily. So that idea changes if you age the characters up. and the insight into those periods of your life and those particular perspectives disappears once you age them up. I'm not interested in a college age Jack. I'm just not. I'm interested in my sons, growing up. But in terms of the interest for me in this movie, it stays more iconic if everyone kind of situates themselves. I also was on the first 8 seasons of The Simpsons, and that's worked out rather well for them. So, I'll stick with that.
So the first movie came out years before Disney bought Marvel, and before the birth of this Marvel Cinematic Universe. Can you talk about how this superhero movie renaissance has affected The Incredibles in any way?
Well, it on some level, it's kind of like going out to the football field and there's been way too many games on it, and there's just kind of this dried dirt with a few sprigs of grass, and everything's kind of clunky, and life doesn't grow there anymore. So there's that aspect where you feel like, oh, Jesus, it's really been covered. It's kind of reminds me of the way Westerns were in the late 50s, where if you had a television, 95% of what was on was a Western. So we're in that phase a little bit, and it makes it very challenging on a story level, because not only do you have every superhero under the sun and cross-promoting films and blah, 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 but you also have a bunch of television shows. And even years ago, there was a show called Heroes with the creator of actually told me it was a mashup of the movies Crash and The Incredibles. He said, I was influenced by that, and I thought if you melded Crash with The Incredibles, that's kind of what this is. But Heroes used to do 5, 6, 10 different superheroes with storylines that continued on every week. So you were doing, quantum superhero stories every week, and it seemed like, everything had been done. So it's easy to freak out and go, well, why even try? Everybody's got everything done to death. But then again, I return to what makes us unique, and it's this idea of a family, and that superheroes have to hide their abilities, and those things actually are unique to us, and there's plenty left to explore. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and when we were trying to sell the idea of the first Incredibles, one of the criticisms of it was, well, what is it? Is it a family movie? Is it a spy movie? Is it a superhero movie? We know, what is it? What is it? You got to pick one. And I think that's been the strength of both the films, is that they are all those things, and that it isn't rooted in just a superhero genre.
Yeah.
The first Incredibles was, to me, pretty much the perfect film.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble now. Damn, if I'd only left it there.
And everything I've seen of this one indicates it's going to be fantastic.
Oh, good.
But my question is that back then, diversity wasn't being discussed very much in film. Now it's very much on everybody's mind. It should be. But in the footage that I saw, I didn't see much of that reflected.
Well, it's in there. It's not in the sections that you saw.
Okay.
It doesn't. We are just telling the story we want to tell. Some people have remarked, because we've just started sort of talking about this, that we geared this towards the Me Too movement because it's got a female lead and all this stuff, and we were in production. I had that idea right on the heels of the first film. That's the oldest idea in this current movie, that and exploring Jack's powers. So we don't really respond to this, whatever the thing of the moment is, because our lead times are so long. We just kind of tell the stories we want to tell. But that said, the first walk-around character in Disneyland that was black is Frozone. Right. And so, I think we've done okay, and we will continue to kind of present that sort of world, because that's the world that we live in.
Okay, well, speaking for like black females, it would be nice to see you.
Black female? Yeah, we have a few, but should I say? Well, okay, we wanted to show Honey in this movie.
That's my dream.
Yeah, well, okay, we didn't end up doing it because it's funnier as a voice. So we actually went through all the trouble of designing the character, and the design appears in the movie, but not as Frozone's wife.
She's in there.
I one today. Just so you know.
Did you?
One of my activities. She was my superhero, Honey.
All right.
She's sweet, but beware her sting.
Well, okay. I like it.
Well done.
We're actually looking for new story people. Yeah. No, that sounds good. We have used her design, and she is a hero. There's not a lot of screen time, though, on it. So the problem is we have a lot of different things that we want the movie to be about, and we're already, the two Incredibles movies are already the longest movies at Pixar, and they are never happy about that.
Never.
They're like, what's your job being so long? And we're like, well, you got a lot of stuff to put on the screen.
We gotta get Honey in somehow.
Yeah. So that's our struggle. But I hope you like the new movie.
Thank you.
You made a joke out of, you should have left it there. How quickly did you tackle in finding the story for this one, the fact that you have a bunch of people who love what you did in the original, sort of the sequel challenge of it?
I think that it's really distracting to think of that. If you think about pleasing an audience that has no definition, it's old, it's young, it's east, west, north, south, conservatives, liberals, everyone in between. If you try to think about it pleasing that, and what will they like 2 years from now? I mean, you just will curl up into a fetal ball and never come out of your room. The better way to think about it is I'm going into a darkened movie theater, the curtains are opening, and I'm seeing what? What do I want to see? And if you ask that question of yourself that way, you're always connecting with the person that wants to be told a story. And that to me is I feel comfortable answering that question rather than what will audiences like, what will critics like, what did they like about the last one, and do I do it again because they like it, or do I try to surprise them? And the answer is a little bit of both. You want the characters to feel consistent. You want the world to feel consistent. But you don't want to be able to know what's going to happen next. So that's the challenge, and it's not an easy challenge to meet, but it definitely is your job if you're making films.
Yeah, and the fact that we took 14 years to do it, suggests that we took the challenge seriously.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that many sequels are cash grabs. And, there's a saying in the business that I can't stand where they go, you don't make another one, you're leaving money on the table. And it's like, Jesus, money on the table is not what makes me get up in the morning. Making something that people are going to enjoy 100 years from now is what gets me up. So if it were a cash grab, we would not have taken 14 years. It makes no financial sense to wait this long. It's sheerly, we had a story that we wanted to tell.
You had said exploring Jack's power was a big part of this movie. Were there any specific guidelines you gave the animation team, like don't go this far with it, there's limits?
Really, the first limitations would go to the story team. When I was, saying here's this scene. Now, let's explore it visually. And I didn't put a lot of limits on them initially, and so they started doing everything. And I think that we started to go, all right, we got to settle down a little bit toward Act 3. We don't want to have any new powers in Act 3. And then we got into Act 3, and there were a few points where, it'd be really cool if we had one more new power here. And so we kind of told ourselves to stay strictly on our diet, and we kind of broke it a couple of times. So, no, we didn't have a lot of limitations. We tried to treat this very unrealistic world, try to pepper in realism in terms of what what people think, how they react to having powers. He's presented as a baby, so what interests him is what interests a baby. It's he never understands what's going on and can anticipate the villain's move or whatever. It's more like, that's shiny, I like that. This makes me angry, I want to go there, I mean, it's those kind of emotions, and then you build the superpowers around that. So he's still a baby, even though he has these powers that he only has limited control over.
We learned that there's some new superheroes introduced in this. Would you say that they derive from the same type of, kind of 60s Silver Age influence that we see in the first one? Or
Silver Age?
That's kind of the comic book term.
Oh, I don't know that. I'm sorry. You could say anything now and I'd believe you, right before the rubber era. And I'd go, oh, wow, it was the rubber era? I got to bone up.
Yeah, that's slightly later. But we're the same type of aesthetic for the superheroes, or a little bit more across the map in terms of what kind of influence those characters?
Boy, I don't know. I would say that the movie has a sort of a late 50s, early 60s aesthetic, and that we've tried to stay with that. It is a strange world. It doesn't adhere strictly to the 60s. So we had, in the first movie, we had an iPad before there were iPads. In fact, I think, Apple owes me on that one. So we have gadgets that are futuristic gadgets. But, for instance, in this movie, we don't have portable phones. And, in some aspects of this story, it would have made things easier if we'd had cell phones. And in other aspects, it would have made things harder, because you always go, well, why don't you just pick up your phone? And, and that gets to be kind of boring story-wise, too. Oh, let me stop and check, You would have the movie with all these fantastic characters basically going, And so it's always been this blend of, it's kind of 60s futurism, the way a Bond film is, or Johnny Quest or something like that. So that part of it has kind of always been influenced by spy movies. But we kind of, I would say we stay generally with the playbook established by the first film. It's just that we're better at doing it now.
How much leeway do you give the other teams in the film for an action sequence like the Elasticycle scene?
Leeway?
Like how much?
I'm heavily into choreographing the shots, and I have very strong opinions. That said, I try to create an atmosphere where I will get the shot that I want, but if somebody comes up with an alternate shot that they think would be cool, they can persuade me. But I'm not one of these people that goes, you're good at figuring out action sequences, go figure it out. I'm elbows in. I have very strong opinions about how I like to see things staged. I mean, ask people. So some people have said, why am I the only Pixar director that works alone? And, everyone else, there are a million different ways to make a film, and one of the great things about this company is that it allows for that and accommodates that. But I always look at the other filmmakers and I go, why would you give up any part of this movie? Why would you give that up? Why would you give it to someone else to do? And they just wave at me like, shut up, So that's the best way to handle me. Just tell me to shut up.
But one thing I would say is because of the limited schedule, and on the first movie, you were able to choreograph a lot of that stuff very carefully. In storyboarding.
And on this, we had to move fast.
Yeah, so folks were throwing a lot of stuff up there and bringing it back to you.
And, there are a lot of good ideas that I used. Mm-hmm. So I'm not opposed to other people's notions. I just want to make sure that I get mine in first. Yeah.
There was a very interesting idea in the first movie about what makes someone special, super, and exploring, if everyone is super, then no one is super, and those sorts of things. To you, what's the idea or ideas that this movie is exploring?
It explores a lot of ideas. I don't like to talk about the ideas as if that was the reason I made the movie, was to push some agenda. It's more like you create something that's hopefully is fun and entertaining, and then there are places where you can put get little ideas here and there that add dimension to it. So the first most important mission of the first movie was to entertain the crap out of people. And the second thing was, and we have some other things we'd like to comment on, and some of them is the role of men and women, fathers and mothers. How do teenagers view the world? Midlife crisis, that kind of stuff. And so there were a lot of little things kind of buried in the movie. Certain things got more attention. That thing got attention. But we have things about, again, exploring the roles of men and women, the importance of fathers participating, the importance of allowing women to also express themselves through work, and that they're just as vital as men are, and there's aspects of being controlled by screens. There's feelings about the difficulties of parenthood. That parenting is a heroic act. All of those things are kind of in this movie. But if I start to single out one of them and say this movie is about that, it doesn't give you an accurate picture of the movie. It makes it sound like we're having broccoli and not dessert. And I don't mind nutrition, but I'd like to have it in dessert if possible. Yeah.
In the approximately 22 minutes of the film that we did see, there was arguably some amazing vocal acting between Craig T. Nelson and Holly and all other sorts of folks. Who do you think in the vocal booth this time really took it to the next level from the old guard and then also the new people that are coming into the fold?
There's no weak link in I'm the worst person to ask because I think they're all just fantastic. I would say that when I was an animator, I really hoped that I would have a good soundtrack to animate to, because what takes an actor 5 seconds to say may take an animator 3 weeks to animate. And they have to listen to that dialogue over and over and over and over. And if it's flat and boring, you just want to kill yourself. But if there's dimension to the line reading, something to grab onto and explore, you can dive deep on a single line, and it's endlessly fascinating. So I try to collect the kind of soundtracks that I would want if I were an animator. And all of our actors delivered. Of the new actors, Bob Odenkirk and Catherine Keener and Sophia Bush just kick it out through the roof. There's a character named Void who is a new superhero of the wannabes, and she admires Helen and is kind of a Helen groupie. And I described her to the animators as like we had this dog that was this very big, powerful dog, and it only had 2 settings, and one was in your face, love me, love me, love me, love me, love me, love me, and when you said finally get off, it was I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and then you'd go, oh, it's okay, and then love me, love me, love me, love me. And she's a little bit like that, where she's always kind of leaning in a little too much and is a little too ready to ask you 10 million questions, and it's a fun character. I've never seen that before in a superhero movie, so we're always trying to juice it up. But I love our voice cast, and I loved returning to working with Holly and Craig and Sarah, and we have a new Dash who is amazing, just every bit as good as the first Dash, who was also amazing. And
Jonathan Banks was
the one who did our voice, Bud Lucky, who did the voice for Rick Dicker, he was sick, and then he's since died. We had to replace him, and we got Jonathan Banks. I'm a huge Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul fan, so he took over the role of Rick Dicker. And as Walker says, the first Rick Dicker, you can't imagine that he possibly could have killed a man, and this Dicker, you could accept that. Yeah. So, but Jonathan Banks
more than one,
is a wonderful wonderful actor, and he's really great as Rick Dicker. So I would love to tell you that one person was excellent above all other, but they're all on that level. To me, I'm the worst person to ask.
And then there's E.
No, there is not E.
So Pixar obviously has a motto of story being king, and everything is done in service of the story. It's been 14 years since the first movie came out, so can you talk about how the story kind of developed in your mind and maybe some of the ideas that didn't make it into this movie and how it evolved?
We don't have enough time to discuss the ideas that didn't make it into this movie. The two ideas that were in my head as the first movie was ending, like, oh, this would be interesting, is a role switch between Bob and Helen, and showing Jack-Jack's powers and exploring them and making Jack-Jack a main character rather than a side character. And the other ideas, those were in from the beginning and never left the project. What changed is the plot, the superhero, villain plot, and that shifted endlessly, and it drove me insane. And because I always was faced with the release date, and if something didn't work, I couldn't sit there and try to bang on it. I had to throw it away immediately and go to another idea that solved some of the issues that the other first idea didn't have. So that half of the story was shifting always.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to thank the filmmakers for...
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so that was the interview. And I think the thing that really stood out to me is Brad's honesty or candor. With this being a sequel, he had a little bit of defense to play as far as people coming with him with those types of questions. Why do the sequel, and when did you think of this, and all this other stuff. So he doesn't slip up. So he's playing a little bit of defense, but like I said before, he doesn't slip up and reveal anything he doesn't want to, which is crazy because he's in the weeds on it. I enjoyed the extra notes about Ratatouille, that there was only 2 lines and 2 shots from the original film that made it into that movie.
Which makes me wonder if it was like anyone can cook.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody was curious, but I'm glad nobody asked that question because we're not there for that.
Yeah.
Right, but I wanted to know.
I'd love to just go out to dinner with him and be like, so can you tell us?
Exactly. So I thought that was cool. I was beyond thrilled to ask a question. That's my goal in every one of these sessions, but it was a big goal in this one. And I was eating lunch with some Pixar employees when our press group started going upstairs for the meeting, and I was like, uh-oh. So I had to close up shop with them real quick with him and get my lunch to the recycling, the plate and tray and everything, and get upstairs. And by the time I got there wasn't any room in the first 10 rows of seats, and it was pretty thin as far as number of seats across, so I was closer to the back. And so I luckily, when I walked in though, I put my recorder on the table right in front of Brad. So hopefully you guys liked the audio quality of that, because I put it right in front of him and then spread the mics out a little bit to touch on Nicole and where I thought John and Nicole were going to sit, and luckily it worked out. But so I was in the back, so I just had to hit record and hope it went well because I couldn't check my levels or anything. But regardless, the moderator was looking towards the front of the audience, which I appreciated from the sense that it's being recorded because people in the back could be asking questions quietly. But I had to keep nudging my way forward and standing up and raising my hand. And so finally one of the other PR people went and said, you should really just let this guy ask a question because he's been raising his hand since the first question. Right. And I was the second to last. And the last one, he basically just was 1 minute answer. It was a quick one. So I was thrilled about that. The vocal booth stuff is something that we're always
interested in.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to know what the characters are doing. And like I said, I wasn't trying to ever trick anybody into revealing anything, but I was interested to see if he was going to say oh, I can now also say that so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so are doing voices. But nope, he just stuck to Catherine Keener, Bob Odenkirk, and Sophia Bush. I think I said that earlier. Yes. But yeah, he just kept it to that. So I thought that was really it was cool, and I felt glad that I was able to get that question in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you liked the part about Honey.
Yes.
That it's a funnier character.
It is. When being like not hidden, but
off screen.
Off screen, like in the next room.
Right. Rather than having her character made.
Yes.
And I thought it was cool that he's like, well, we made a character and her rig is used on someone else, but
yeah, I think it's a much better, not that it's a gag, but it's just funnier.
It's comedic relief. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like a nagging kind of wife, just like in the other room.
He's just rolling his eyes, and we even saw that in the trailer that was just released.
Right.
So yeah, if you haven't seen that trailer and our reaction to that, not a reaction trailer, but our breakdown of it, where we talked for 2 hours about a 2-minute trailer.
It's always 2 hours.
I know. So yeah, if you haven't seen that, you can also check that out on our YouTube channel. So it's just youtube.com/The Pixar Post, or you can go to pixarpost.com and click on the YouTube button. But anyways, I think that about wraps it up for this one. What do you think?
I think so.
I think it's a good setup for many more podcasts to come, and thanks for bearing with us on our little hiatus there. We had a couple things that, like always, life gets in the way, right?
Right.
We had our up moments where it's like we kept cracking open
our Adventure Falls
the jar.
Jug.
Yeah. So anyways, happy to be back, and thanks for bearing with us. Hopefully you enjoyed this interview with Brad, Nicole, and John, and we will see you next time. So in the meantime, be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, if you like today's show, let us know. Rate us on iTunes, leave a comment on our site, or send us an email, info@pixarpost.com. Signing off as usual, I'm TJ.
And I'm Julie.
And be sure to stay tuned to pixarpost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Bye-bye.